Neri huddled in the dark corner of the waste processing unit, her violet skin dimmed with grime and fatigue. 3 days had passed since her family had sedated her and left her among the discarded machinery on Station 7. The cold metal floor bit into her thin frame as she pulled her knees closer to her chest. Her once beautiful ceremonial clothes, given to her for what she thought would be a special family ritual, were now torn and stained. They had dressed her nicely for her own disposal. Defective, they had called her when they thought she was unconscious from the sedative. The empathic mutation that let her sense emotions wasn't something to be celebrated among the Talon people. It was something to be feared, eliminated. She remembered her father's face, usually so stern and proud, looking at her with something she had never seen before, pity mixed with disgust. Her mother had wept silently, but her emotions betrayed her true feelings. Relief that the family would be safe from shame once Neri was gone. The worst had been her brother Ta, only 2 cycles older than her 16 cycles. His emotions had been a storm of confusion and betrayal. He had loved her once, before her abilities had emerged during their last family gathering. When she had suddenly collapsed from the weight of all the hidden feelings in the room, the jealousies, the secrets, the lies, they knew what she was. Neri shifted positions, wincing at the pain in her back. She had awakened alone, surrounded by trash, the remnants of her family bond severed from her mind. The traditional culling would have been quicker, but her mother's final act of mercy had been this instead. Abandonment rather than execution. A deep rumble shook the floor beneath her. The station's waste processing units were starting another cycle. Soon the sorting arms would sweep through this section, gathering materials for recycling or disposal. Organic matter would be processed into fuel. The thought made her shudder. Neri's stomach growled as she eyed the sorting machines. She would need to move soon or risk being processed along with the station's refuse. She had found some discarded food packets in the commercial waste section yesterday, but nothing since then. The hunger was becoming hard to ignore. She crawled toward a pile of discarded containers, hoping to find something edible. Her hands, once soft and carefully tended, were now scratched and dirty. The nail on her index finger was torn where she had caught it trying to pry open a sealed container. The distant sound of voices made her freeze. Workers, human workers. She had seen them from a distance, but had hidden whenever they came near. Humans were unpredictable. Some species in the galaxy feared them, others respected them, but all agreed they were dangerous in their own way. "Check section E7 before lunch," a voice called out. The sensors picked up some unusual movement. Neri's heart raced. She was in section E7. They were coming for her. She scrambled deeper into the trash heap, disturbing a pile of metallic scraps that clattered to the floor. "Did you hear that?" The voice was closer now. Neri closed her eyes, trying to control her breathing. Sometimes, if she concentrated hard enough, she could make herself almost invisible to others. It wasn't true invisibility, just a way of pushing a feeling of disinterest toward others so they would look past her. It had worked sometimes at home, before they discovered her true nature. The footsteps stopped just on the other side of the trash pile. Neri could sense curiosity, boredom, and slight annoyance. Typical emotions of someone doing a job they didn't particularly enjoy. Probably just the trash settling. Another voice said, "Let's finish the rounds and get to lunch. I'm starving." The footsteps moved away, and Neri let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. But her relief was short-lived. The rumbling grew louder, and the floor began to vibrate more intensely. The processing cycle was beginning. She needed to move now. Gathering what little strength she had, Neri crawled from her hiding place and headed toward an access corridor she had spotted earlier. If she could reach it before the sorting arms activated, she might survive another day. Her legs shook as she stood for the first time in hours. The gravity on the station was slightly stronger than on her home world, making every movement harder. Her head spun from hunger and dehydration. The first sorting arm whirred to life, its metal claw opening and closing as it moved toward her section. Neri stumbled forward, her bare feet slipping on the smooth floor. The access corridor was 10 meters away. The sorting arm swung closer, its sensors scanning for materials to collect. Nari's violet skin would register as organic matter, valuable fuel for the station. 8 meters. Her lungs burned. The arm locked onto her heat signature and changed direction. 6 meters. She could feel the rush of air as the claw opened behind her. 4 meters. Her legs threatened to give out. The claw closed on empty air, just centimeters from her back. 2 meters. The door to the access corridor was sealed, but there was a small maintenance hatch at its base, just large enough for her small frame. Nari threw herself to the ground and pulled at the hatch. It didn't budge. The sorting arm was resetting for another grab. Desperate, she slammed her palm against the hatch's lock mechanism. Pain shot through her hand, but the hatch popped open. The claw was moving again. Nari squeezed through the opening, scraping her shoulders and back on the jagged metal edges. She pulled her feet through just as the claw snapped shut where she had been lying. Safe for the moment, Nari collapsed in the narrow maintenance tunnel. Her body trembled from exertion and fear. Tears cut clean tracks down her dirt-stained face. This was her life now. Running, hiding, surviving. The daughter of one of the most respected Talon families, reduced to living like vermin in a space station's waste system. As she curled up in the cramped tunnel, Nari wondered if death might have been kinder than this existence. But something inside her refused to give up. A stubborn spark that insisted she was not what her family had labeled her. She was not defective. She was different. And somehow, she would find a way to survive. June adjusted his salvage helmet and checked the oxygen levels before continuing through the processing sector. His small salvage operation depended on finding valuable components that larger operations overlooked. After 5 years working solo on the edges of controlled space, he had developed a keen eye for spotting treasures among trash. Only 2 more hours of oxygen, he muttered to himself, making a mental note to finish quickly. Station 7 was notorious for its strict time limits on salvage permits, and the fines for staying past his allotted time would eat up any profits he might make today. He moved deeper into Section E7, stepping carefully over piles of discarded machinery. His scanner beeped softly when he passed a heap of broken communication devices. June smiled. High-grade transmitters contained rare metals that fetched a good price in the border markets. As he bent down to examine the heap, a faint movement caught his eye. Unusual in the automated facility, the processing sections were supposed to be empty of all personnel during salvage hours. "Hello," he called, moving his light toward the shadow. "Station security. I have a valid permit." No answer came, but he was certain something had moved. June frowned. The station was strict about salvagers staying in their assigned sectors. If another salvager was trying to poach in his area, he needed to report it. He stepped closer, moving his light methodically across the area. Then he saw it, a quick movement behind a pile of discarded hull plating. Too small for an adult. "Is there a child in here?" "This area is dangerous," he called out, concern replacing his annoyance. Sometimes station workers brought their children to work, but never into the processing sections. Moving closer, he shifted some of the lighter pieces of scrap. The beam from his helmet light revealed 2 frightened eyes, glowing with an unnatural purple hue. June froze. This wasn't discarded tech. This wasn't even a human child. This was an alien being. The eyes blinked rapidly, and June could now make out more of the creature. He realized, was huddled in a defensive position. Her skin was a muted violet color, and she appeared humanoid, but with distinctly non-human features. Pointed ears that extended horizontally rather than vertically, and those remarkable purple eyes that seemed to glow from within. "What in the stars?" June whispered, his training immediately kicking in. During his military service, he had encountered many alien species, but never one like this. She appeared young, perhaps even a child by her species standards. When he approached, he saw her clearly, young, alien, and obviously abandoned. Despite her fear, she didn't flee. She was trapped, or perhaps too weak to run. Her clothes were torn and dirty, clearly once fine garments now reduced to rags. Jun slowly removed his helmet, letting her see his human face. He remembered his xenobiology training. Many species responded better to visible facial expressions. "I won't hurt you," Jun said softly, offering his hand. "I'm human. My name is Jun." The alien girl pressed herself further against the wall, her eyes never leaving his face. She was clearly terrified. But there was something else in her expression, a desperate hope. Jun remained still, his hand extended but not moving closer. "Do you understand me? Are you hurt?" The girl didn't respond verbally, but her eyes darted to a wound on her arm, then back to his face. The cut was crusted with a strange, silvery substance, blood perhaps. "You're injured," Jun said, pointing to his own arm to convey his meaning. "I can help." He slowly reached for his emergency med kit, maintaining eye contact as he did so. "This is medicine," he explained, knowing she might not understand his words, but hoping his tone would convey his intentions. As he prepared a basic antiseptic, a loud mechanical whir filled the section. The girl flinched violently. The sorting arms, Jun realized aloud. They're starting the next cycle early. Without hesitation, Jun made a decision. He couldn't leave a sentient being, especially one so young, to die in the waste processors. He closed the distance between them quickly, noting how the girl tensed but didn't try to escape. "We need to go," he said urgently, mimicking walking with his fingers. "Not safe here." The mechanical sounds grew louder. They had minutes, perhaps seconds. The girl looked at the approaching machinery, then back at Jun. Something passed between them, an understanding. She gave a small nod. Jun reached out slowly, and when she didn't pull away, gently lifted her. She was surprisingly light, her body trembling against his chest. Up close, he could see how malnourished she appeared, her frame fragile under his hands. "I've got you," he said, securing his helmet with his free hand. "Let's get out of here." He moved as quickly as he dared toward the exit, feeling the vibrations of the sorting machinery growing stronger. The girl clung to him, her face buried against his shoulder. As they reached the airlock, Jun glanced back. The massive sorting arm was already sweeping through the area where he'd found her. Had he been a few minutes later? The airlock closed behind them with a reassuring hiss. In the brighter light of the corridor, Jun got his first clear look at the girl. Her condition was worse than he'd thought. Besides the cut on her arm, she showed signs of dehydration and malnutrition. How long had she been surviving in the waste processing unit? "My ship is docked nearby," he told her, even though he wasn't sure she understood. "I'll get you food, water, and proper medical attention." The girl's eyes studied his face intently, as if trying to read something beyond his words. Then, to his surprise, she reached out and lightly touched his cheek with her small hand. An unexpected sensation washed over Jun, a feeling of gratitude so intense it brought tears to his eyes. Somehow, he knew the feeling wasn't his own. It was hers, projected into his mind. "You're telepathic," he whispered in amazement. She withdrew her hand, watching his reaction carefully. Jun smiled reassuringly. "It's okay. I've met telepathic species before. You're safe with me." As he carried her toward his ship, Jun wondered what circumstances had led to this young alien being abandoned among garbage. One thing was certain: his simple salvage operation had just become much more complicated. "The water is clean, I promise," Jun said, offering Nari a cup aboard his salvage vessel, the HFY. The small ship hummed quietly around them, its systems well maintained despite its age. Nari's slender purple fingers wrapped around the cup hesitantly. She sniffed the water first, a habit Jun had noticed over the past 2 weeks. On her world, scent revealed much about a substance's safety. She took a small sip, then a larger one, her body clearly desperate for hydration. 2 weeks had passed since he'd found her. The first days had been the hardest. Nari had been terrified, weakened and unable to communicate. She had slept for nearly 20 hours straight after he brought her aboard, her body shutting down to heal once it recognized she was safe. June had used that time to research her species in the ship's database. The Talons were not well known in human space, a private, advanced civilization that rarely ventured beyond their own star systems. What little information existed described them as highly intelligent, technologically advanced, and extremely private about their culture. Better? June asked as Neri finished the water. She nodded. Yes. Thank you. Her pronunciation was still slightly off, but teaching her human language had been surprisingly easy. The Talon ability to process information was remarkable. In just 2 weeks, she had developed a basic vocabulary and was now forming complete sentences. Her wounds had mostly healed, though the emotional ones ran deeper. June had treated the physical injuries with his med kit, the cut on her arm, the bruises, the malnutrition. But he often caught her staring into space, her purple eyes dimmed with sorrow. "Would you like to try some solid food today?" June asked, moving to the small galley area. "I have some fruit. Sweet, soft. Might be good for you to try." Nari followed him with her eyes. "Yes, I will try." June cut a piece of synthetic apple, one of the few luxuries he allowed himself on long salvage runs. He placed it on a clean plate and set it before her. Nari examined it curiously before taking a small bite. Her eyes widened in surprise, and she quickly took another, larger bite. "Good," June smiled. "Good," she agreed, finishing the piece quickly. "Different from Talon food. Our food is less sweet." June sat across from her at the small table. These moments of conversation were becoming more frequent as her confidence in speaking grew. Each new detail about her life and culture fascinated him. "Nari," he said gently, "can you tell me more about why your family?" He paused, unsure how to phrase it delicately. "Why they threw me away." She finished for him, her voice matter-of-fact despite the pain in her eyes. "My family believed my abilities would bring shame," Nari explained, her newly learned words careful and measured. "Empaths are considered dangerous." "Dangerous? Why?" June asked, genuinely puzzled. "Being able to sense emotions seems like a useful skill." Nari's slender fingers traced patterns on the table. "Talons value privacy. Mental privacy most of all. Our society works because thoughts and feelings stay hidden. Empaths break this rule. But you can't read thoughts, can you?" Just emotions, she confirmed. "But for Talons, that is enough to cause fear. Emotions reveal too much truth." She looked down at her hands. "When my ability emerged, I sensed my uncle's jealousy of my father. I sensed my cousin's secret love for someone forbidden. I sensed my teacher's hatred for a student she pretended to like." June began to understand. "So you saw through the lies that keep your society functioning." Nari nodded. "I was 16 cycles old when it happened. Too old to be trained to control it," they said. "Too dangerous to keep." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The normal solution is culling. My mother chose abandonment instead." June felt a surge of anger at the cruelty of it. Abandoning a child in a waste facility was considered an act of mercy. He took a deep breath to control his reaction, not wanting Nari to sense his rage. "On Earth, such gifts would be treasured, not discarded," he said after a moment. Treasured. The concept seemed foreign to her. She tilted her head, a gesture June had come to recognize as confusion. "Humans value differences," June explained. "Our history taught us that diversity brings strength. People with unique abilities help society grow and adapt." Nari looked skeptical. "Even abilities that reveal secrets?" "Especially those," June said with a small smile. "Humans learned long ago that secrets often cause more problems than they solve. In many Earth cultures, empaths would be respected counselors, mediators, therapists." "What is a therapist?" Nari asked. "Someone who helps others understand and process their emotions. They help people heal emotional wounds. June leaned forward. In fact, many humans spend years training to develop just a fraction of the empathic ability you were born with. For the first time since he'd found her, Neri smiled. It was small, hesitant, as if she had forgotten how. But it transformed her face, making her look her age rather than the wary, older soul he had rescued. I never thought of it as valuable, she admitted. Only as a curse. June reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand, respecting her space. It's not a curse, Nari. It's a gift. One that was misunderstood by your people. She studied his face, and June knew she was sensing his emotions, testing the truth of his words. After a moment, she relaxed slightly. You believe what you say, she observed. Your emotions match your words. Is that unusual? June asked. Very, Neri said seriously. Most people, Talons especially, say one thing while feeling another. You do not. June considered this. Is that why you trusted me? In the waste facility? Neri nodded. I sensed no deception, no cruelty. Only concern. It was unfamiliar. The ship's computer chimed, interrupting their conversation. Approaching waypoint station, the automated voice announced. Docking procedures initiating. June stood. We're reaching a trading post. I need to sell the salvage I collected and get some supplies. He hesitated. And I should find you some proper clothes. Maybe some education modules so you can continue learning. Neri's eyes widened with alarm. I cannot leave the ship if there are other Talons. You don't have to leave, June assured her quickly. You can stay here. The ship is secure. But Neri, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Eventually, we need to decide what happens next. You can't hide forever. She looked down. I have nowhere to go. That's not true, June said gently. There are human colonies that welcome refugees of all species, places where your abilities would be respected, not feared. Would they accept me? A Talon outcast. They would, June confirmed. But we have time to figure it out. For now, focus on getting stronger. Neri looked around the small cabin that had become her sanctuary. Your kindness. I do not know how to repay it. You don't need to, June said simply. Helping you was the right thing to do. As he prepared for docking, June watched Neri examining her reflection in the polished surface of the table. She touched her face gently, as if reacquainting herself with her own features. For the first time, he saw something beyond fear and pain in her expression. He saw hope. The alert blared through the HFY as they docked at Orbital Platform 12. The harsh sound cut through the peaceful atmosphere that had developed over the past month aboard June's salvage vessel. Security scan detected Talon life signs. The automated system announced. Matching genetic profile. Fugitive variant. June cursed. They're looking for you. He rushed to the control panel, fingers flying across the interface as he pulled up the station's security feeds. Neri's face paled to a lighter shade of violet. I sensed them. 3 hunters. Their intentions are. She trembled. They want to correct the mistake. You're not a mistake, June said firmly, starting the emergency launch sequence. I have friends at the New Busan colony. We'll find protection there. The ship shuddered as docking clamps released prematurely. Alarms blared in protest at the improper launch procedure. Station control to vessel HFY. You are not cleared for departure. A stern voice came through the comms. Power down immediately or face penalties. June ignored the warning, pushing the engines to full power. Strap in, he told Neri. This will be rough. Neri fumbled with the harness, her hands shaking. Over the past weeks, she had grown stronger, learned more human language, and even started to smile occasionally. Now, the terror had returned to her eyes, erasing all progress. Will they force us to stop? She asked, her voice small. Not if I can help it, June answered, his jaw set in determination. He had come to care deeply for the young Talon, her gentle spirit, and remarkable mind, becoming a bright spot in his solitary life. As they detached from the station, a Talon enforcement vessel appeared on their scanners, weapons charging. The sleek, silver ship was 3 times the size of the Heta and clearly built for pursuit. Salvage vessel Heta. This is Talon enforcement, a cold voice announced over the comms. You are harboring a genetic deviant. Power down and prepare to be boarded. June cut the communication link. Don't listen to them, he told Nari. They have no authority in human space. They don't care about authority, Nari whispered. The Genetic Purity Division operates beyond normal laws. June's hands tightened on the controls. Then we'll just have to outrun them. He steered the Heta toward a nearby asteroid field. Hold on. The Heta was not designed for speed or combat, but it had one advantage: maneuverability. June had modified the engines and guidance systems to navigate tight spaces, perfect for accessing difficult salvage sites. Now that same agility might save their lives. The Talon vessel fired a warning shot, the energy beam passing dangerously close to their port side. Next shot will not miss, the Talon enforcer warned, re-establishing contact. Return the deviant immediately. She has a name, June snapped back, and she's under my protection. The Heta shuddered as June pushed it beyond safe speeds, racing toward the dense field of asteroids ahead. The ship's computer flashed warning signs. The hull wasn't designed for this kind of stress. Nari closed her eyes, concentrating. They are confused by your actions, she said quietly. They don't understand why a human would risk himself for a Talon deviant. Can they sense your abilities from this distance? June asked, concerned. Nari shook her head. No. But if they get close enough for a detailed scan, she didn't need to finish. They both knew what would happen. The first asteroids loomed ahead, massive chunks of rock and ice spinning slowly in the void. June threaded the Heta between 2 of them, barely clearing the jagged surfaces. The Talon ship followed, its superior technology allowing it to navigate the hazards with ease. Another warning shot struck an asteroid near them, sending fragments pinging against their hull. We can't outrun them, June admitted, checking the damage reports flashing across his screen. But maybe we can outsmart them. He pointed to a cluster of densely packed asteroids ahead. There's an old mining operation in that section. Abandoned tunnels run through some of the larger rocks. If we can reach it. Nari nodded, understanding. The tunnels would shield me from their scanners. Exactly. June altered course, heading directly for the largest asteroid in the cluster. It was a desperate plan, but their only chance. The Talon ship fired again, this time striking the Heta's rear deflector. The lights flickered as power systems struggled to compensate. Damage to engine cooling systems, the computer reported. Overheating imminent. June ignored the warnings, pushing the ship harder. The mining operation appeared on their visual scanners. A series of dark openings in the asteroid's surface, barely large enough for a ship the Heta's size. That opening. He pointed to a particularly narrow tunnel entrance. It leads to a network of chambers. The Talon ship is too large to follow. Talon vessel to Heta. The cold voice returned. This is your final warning. The genetic deviant must be returned for processing. Her existence threatens Talon purity laws. Nari's hands gripped the sides of her seat. They're preparing to use a tractor beam, she warned, sensing their intentions. Not if we reach that tunnel first. June diverted emergency power to the engines. The ship's frame groaned in protest as they accelerated toward the dark opening. The Talon ship closed the distance rapidly, its superior technology evident in every smooth movement. A blue glow began to form at its front section, the tractor beam powering up. We're not going to make it, Nari whispered, her voice breaking. Yes, we are. June's face was set with determination. Shut down all non-essential systems. Now. Nari quickly followed his instructions, turning off life support to all but the cockpit, diverting every scrap of power to the engines. The Heta surged forward with one final burst of speed, just as the tractor beam reached for them. They slipped into the narrow tunnel entrance, scraping the hull against the rocky sides with a terrible screeching sound. Darkness enveloped them as they plunged into the asteroid. June activated minimal lighting, revealing a narrow mining tunnel barely wider than their ship. Behind them, the Talon vessel hovered at the entrance, unable to follow. "They can't come in, but we can't stay here forever," Jum said, checking the damage reports. "The good news is they can't scan for you in here. The bad news is we're leaking coolant, and our port stabilizer is damaged." Neri looked at him with wide eyes. "You risked your ship, your life, for me." Jum's expression softened. "Of course I did." "Why?" The question was simple, but filled with genuine confusion. "Because you deserve to live free," Jun replied. "Because what they're doing is wrong. And because," he hesitated, "because in the time you've been aboard, you've become important to me." A notification appeared on the console. "Talon vessel is dispatching smaller craft," the computer warned. "Estimated time of arrival, 20 minutes. Jun nodded grimly. "They're sending hunters in. We need to move deeper into the tunnels." He turned to Neri. "This isn't over. I promised you protection, and I meant it. We can't outrun them forever," Neri said quietly. "We don't need to," Jun replied, steering the damaged ship deeper into the asteroid. "We just need to reach New Buzan colony. My friends there will help us." As they moved through the darkness, Neri placed her hand gently on Jun's arm. "Thank you," she said simply. "No one has ever fought for me before." Jun covered her hand with his own. "Get used to it," he said with a smile. "Because I'm not stopping now." The community hall of New Buzan colony was filled with humans and various alien species. The large circular room, with its high ceiling and natural light, had been designed to host the colony's gatherings. Today, it served a more serious purpose. Colony Director Hyun stood before them, facing the 3 Talon officials who had arrived that morning in their sleek silver shuttle. "This variant is property of the Talon Genetic Authority," stated the lead hunter, his violet skin darker than Neri's, marked with the silver stripes of his rank. Releasing her was unauthorized. His voice carried no emotion, but Neri could feel the disgust radiating from him. She stood beside Jun, no longer cowering as she might have 2 months ago. Her simple blue dress, made for her by one of the colony's tailors, was a stark contrast to the metallic uniforms of the Talon hunters. "She has requested asylum," Director Hyun replied calmly. "Under Galactic Covenant Article 17, we have granted it." The middle-aged woman's posture was relaxed but firm, her hands clasped behind her back as she faced the much taller aliens. The lead hunter's eyes narrowed. "The variant is not a person under Talon law. She is classified as a biological hazard. Article 17 does not apply." Murmurs of anger rippled through the gathered colonists. Neri felt their emotions wash over her. Indignation, protectiveness, resolve. 2 months at the colony had changed her. Here, her empathic abilities were being trained, not feared. "Perhaps not under Talon law," Director Hyun acknowledged. "But we are not on Talon soil. New Buzan recognizes Neri as a sentient being with full rights. This is interference in Talon cultural affairs." The second hunter interjected. "The treatment of genetic deviants is an internal matter." Jun stepped forward, unable to remain silent any longer. "You abandoned her in a waste processing facility. You left her to die. You forfeited any claim to her when you threw her away like trash." The lead hunter's gaze shifted to Jun, cold and calculating. "The human salvager. You will be compensated for your inconvenience. The variant clearly manipulated your emotions using her abnormal abilities." Nari placed a hand on Jun's arm, feeling his anger spike. "He knows that's not true," she said softly. "He's trying to provoke you." An older woman stepped forward from the crowd. Dr. Min, who had been working with Nari since their arrival, moved to stand beside Director Hyun. As New Buzan's chief medical officer, I've been evaluating Neri's empathic abilities. She stated clearly. Far from being a hazard, her talents represent an evolutionary advancement. She doesn't manipulate emotions, she perceives them. There's a significant difference. The third Talon hunter, who had remained silent until now, spoke. The distinction is irrelevant. The genetic purity code is absolute. All deviants must be processed. Processed. Dr. Min raised an eyebrow. You mean killed? The blunt statement caused another wave of emotion from the gathered colonists. Neri breathed deeply, using the techniques Dr. Min had taught her to avoid being overwhelmed by the collective feelings in the room. Director Hyun raised her hand, restoring order. Your laws do not apply here, she continued firmly. And this colony stands united in her protection. She gestured to the gathered crowd. Every person in this room has signed a petition declaring Neri under their personal protection. Furthermore, I've notified the Human Diplomatic Corps of this situation. The lead hunter's composure slipped slightly, a flicker of concern crossing his features. Neri sensed his uncertainty. Dealing with human diplomats would create unwanted attention for the Genetic Purity Division. This is not over, he stated, but the threat in his voice had diminished. The Talon Genetic Authority will file a formal protest. You're welcome to do so, Director Hyun replied. In the meantime, Neri remains under our protection as a legal resident of New Buzan Colony. For a long moment, the three hunters stood motionless, their internal communication implants likely buzzing with instructions from their superiors. Neri could sense their frustration, their disbelief at being thwarted by humans. Finally, the lead hunter gave a stiff nod. We will withdraw for now. But be warned, the Talon Genetic Authority does not forget. If the variant leaves this colony's protection, she will be reclaimed. Her name is Neri, Jun said firmly. And she's not going anywhere. Without another word, the three Talons turned and exited the community hall, their movements synchronized and fluid. The tension in the room broke as soon as the doors closed behind them. Director Hyun turned to Neri with a warm smile. Well, that went better than expected. Their official protest will be filed and promptly ignored by the Human Diplomatic Corps. Neri looked around at the faces of the colonists, human and alien alike, who had stood up for her. Thank you, she said, her voice steady despite the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. I don't know how to repay such kindness. There's no debt to repay, Director Hyun assured her. New Buzan was founded as a sanctuary for those seeking a fresh start. You're hardly the first refugee we've welcomed. As the crowd dispersed, Dr. Min approached Neri. How are you feeling? That must have been intense for an empath. Neri nodded. It was difficult, but I used the shielding techniques you taught me. They helped. Dr. Min beamed with pride. Excellent. You're making remarkable progress. In fact, I wanted to discuss something with you. She glanced at Jun. With both of you, actually. What is it? Jun asked. The colony's mediation council has an opening, Dr. Min explained. Given Neri's unique abilities, she would be an invaluable asset in resolving disputes between colonists. Of course, she would need training. But me, Neri interrupted, surprised. You want me to use my abilities to help others? Precisely, Dr. Min confirmed. What your people feared, we see as a gift. Your empathic talents could help prevent misunderstandings before they escalate. Neri looked at Jun, uncertain. Do you think I could do it? I know you can, he replied without hesitation. You've been helping me understand people better since we met. Hours later, as the day's events settled into memory, Neri and Jun sat on the observation deck of their small dwelling. The colony had provided them with a modest home on the outskirts, where the view of the landscape was unobstructed. New Buzan's twin suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Will they come back? Neri asked quietly, watching the distant shimmer of the force field that protected the colony. Probably not, Jun replied. Talons avoid public conflicts. They'd value their reputation too much. Neri was silent for a moment, absorbing the peace of their surroundings. "My family threw me away," she said quietly, "but I've found a better one." June smiled, his eyes reflecting the sunset. "That's what humans do best. We collect the things others discard and find the value in them." Nari reached out hesitantly and took his hand. For the first time, she deliberately projected her emotions rather than simply sensing those of others. Gratitude, affection, and the quiet joy of finally belonging somewhere. June's eyes widened in surprise as he felt her projected emotions. "That's amazing," he whispered. "Dr. Min has been teaching me to control it," Nari explained. "She says that with practice, I could help people understand each other better." "A bridge between minds," June mused. "Something your people feared could become something that brings others together." As darkness fell over New Busan, lights began to appear across the colony. Homes, workshops, research facilities, all working together to build something greater than themselves. Nari watched them with growing contentment. "Tomorrow I start training with the Mediation Council," she said. "I never imagined my abilities could have a purpose." "Everything has a purpose," June replied, squeezing her hand gently. "Sometimes we just need to find the right place to discover it." Under the alien stars, in a colony built by those who valued differences, Neri finally understood what it meant to be treasured rather than feared. The journey ahead would not be easy. There was much to learn, and the shadow of her past would always be there. But for the first time, she looked to the future with hope rather than dread. She was no longer trash to be discarded. She was treasure to be valued.